before you say anything, before you defend her, before you feel guilty for even clicking on this, before that familiar voice inside you says, "My mother did the best she could." I need you to stay with me for just a moment, because this isn't about blame. This isn't about deciding whether your mother was good or bad, whether she was present or absent, whether she said the right things or the wrong things, whether she held you close or kept you at a distance. This is about something much quieter than that, something that happened so early, so deep inside the part of you that was still forming, that you have absolutely no memory of it happening, but you feel it every single day, in the way you choose who to love, in the way you react when someone pulls away from you, in the way you shrink in certain rooms and expand in others, in the way you need reassurance even when everything is fine, in the way you give too much and then feel empty, in the way you people please until you disappear, in the way you are still, even now, trying to earn something you should have simply been given. Carl Jung called it the mother complex. And once you understand what it actually is, not the simplified version, not the blame version, but the real psychological truth of it, you will never look at your relationships, your patterns, or yourself the same way again. Here's the first thing you need to understand. The mother complex has nothing to do with whether your mother loved you. Let that land for a second, because most people hear the word complex and immediately go defensive. My mom was great. My mom sacrificed everything. My mom was there for me. And maybe all of that is completely true. Jung was not talking about love. He was talking about something that happens inside the developing mind of every child, long before they have any capacity to understand or process what they're experiencing. He was talking about the first relationship, the one that teaches you, and before you have a single word for any of it, what love feels like, what safety feels like, what you have to do to get closeness, what happens when it disappears, what you are worth when no one is watching. That relationship, whatever it actually looked like, became the template, not a template you chose, not a template you can simply decide to stop using, but a template that was written so early, in such permanent ink, that your nervous system has been running on it ever since. Think about your very first memory of needing something, not food, not warmth, but something emotional, something that could only come from another person. You needed to feel seen, to feel safe, to feel like your existence was not a burden but a gift, to feel that the world was a place that would hold you rather than drop you. And whatever happened in those early moments, and however imperfectly or completely that need was met, your brain did something remarkable. It built a map of what love looks like, what it requires, what it costs, what it feels like when it arrives and what it feels like when it doesn't. Jung discovered that this map, this deeply unconscious internal image of what the mother represented, doesn't stay in childhood. It follows you into every friendship, every romantic relationship, every job, every dynamic where someone holds authority or warmth or the power to make you feel accepted or rejected. It follows you into the room you're sitting in right now. Here's where it gets uncomfortably specific, and I want you to notice what happens in your body as I say this. If you grew up with a mother who was warm but anxious, who loved you deeply but worried constantly, you may have learned that love and fear arrive together. That closeness comes with a weight attached. That caring about someone means carrying their emotions alongside your own. And today, without realizing it, you may find yourself in relationships where you are always the one managing the emotional temperature, always the one making sure everyone else is okay before you allow yourself to be okay. If you grew up with a mother who was emotionally unavailable, not cruel, not absent, just somewhere else inside herself, you may have learned that love is something you have to earn, that you have to be useful, impressive, easy, low maintenance enough to deserve closeness. And today you may find yourself working incredibly hard in your relationships, performing, achieving, shrinking your needs down to almost nothing so that no one has a reason to leave. If you grew up with a mother who was unpredictable, loving in one moment and cold in the next, you may have learned that love is inherently unstable, that closeness is always followed by distance, that the moment you relax and trust something good, it will shift. And today you may find yourself unable to fully settle inside a relationship that is actually safe, waiting for something to go wrong, pushing people away right before they get too close, mistaking anxiety for intuition. None of this is your fault. All of it is the map. Jung spent decades documenting this pattern across thousands of people. And what struck him, what he kept returning to in his writing, was how invisible it was to the people living inside it. Because it doesn't feel like a pattern from childhood. It feels like reality. It feels like this is just who you are. This is just how relationships work. This is just what love feels like. This is just the kind of person you attract. This is just your life. It doesn't feel like something that was shaped by early experiences you can barely remember. It feels like the truth. And that, Jung said, is precisely what makes it so powerful. You cannot question something you cannot see. You cannot change a pattern you believe is simply your personality. You cannot heal a wound you have been taught to call a character trait. But here is what Jung also discovered. And this is the part that changes everything. The mother complex is not a life sentence. It is not proof that you are damaged beyond repair. It is not evidence that you are destined to repeat the same patterns forever. It is not something that was done to you that cannot be undone. It is a map. And maps, no matter how old they are, no matter how deeply embedded they have become, can be redrawn. But only if you are willing to first look at the one you have been using. And looking at it is the hardest part. Not because the truth is unbearable, but because looking at it requires you to hold two things at the same time that feel like they cannot coexist. Your mother did the best she could, and it still left a mark. Both of those things are true simultaneously. And the moment you can hold both of them without collapsing into either blame or defense, without making her the villain or erasing your own experience to protect her, something inside you begins to shift. Because you finally stop carrying a story that was never fully yours to begin with. Jung observed something that very few people are willing to admit about themselves. He said that most people don't actually want to examine the mother complex, not because they're lazy, not because they don't care about growing, but because the complex, as painful as it is also deeply familiar. And familiarity feels like safety even when it is slowly destroying you. The person who learned that love requires earning has built an entire identity around being useful, being needed, being the one who gives more than they receive. And as exhausting as that identity is, as lonely as it feels at 3 a.m. when they realize nobody actually knows who they are beneath all that giving, it is known. It is predictable. It is theirs. To let it go feels like losing themselves entirely. But Jung said that what feels like losing yourself is actually finding yourself. Because underneath the pattern, underneath the people-pleasing and the anxiety and the emotional labor and the endless hunger for something that never quite satisfies, there is a person. A real one who never actually needed to earn anything. Here's something Jung wrote that I want you to sit with. He said that the greatest tragedy of the mother complex is not the wound itself. It is the way the wound teaches us to wound ourselves. Think about that for a moment. The child who was made to feel like too much learns to make themselves smaller. Not because anyone is still telling them to, but because the instruction got so deeply embedded that they eventually became the one enforcing it. The child who was made to feel like their emotions were inconvenient learns to disconnect from those emotions. Not because anyone is still dismissing them, but because they learned to dismiss themselves first, before anyone else could. The child who was made to feel that love was conditional learns to present only the most acceptable version of themselves, not because anyone is still demanding it, but because they internalize the demand so completely that they can no longer tell the difference between who they actually are and who they learn to be. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the unconscious running the show. You are no longer reacting to your mother. You are reacting to the version of her that lives inside you, the one that never ages, the one that never updates, the one that is still operating on the information it collected when you were too small to know there was any other way to see the world. So what does it actually look like to begin changing this? Jung was very specific about this. And I want to be specific with you too, because this is not about confronting your mother. It is not about having a conversation she may not be capable of having. It is not about waiting for an apology that may never come. It is not about cutting ties or keeping them. It is about something that happens entirely inside you. Jung called it withdrawing the projection. It means learning to notice and in real time, when you are responding to the person actually in front of you and when you are responding to the map. It means catching yourself in the moment when you automatically shrink and asking, am I actually in danger right now, or does this just feel familiar? It means noticing when you are working incredibly hard to earn someone's approval and asking, do I actually need this person's approval? Or did I learn a long time ago that love required this kind of effort? It means sitting with the discomfort of being in a healthy relationship and not immediately trying to sabotage it. Not because you want to destroy good things, but because your nervous system genuinely doesn't know how to trust something that doesn't feel like the map. None of this happens overnight. Jung never promised it would, but he said something that I think is worth carrying with you. He said that awareness alone, genuine, honest, unflinching awareness, is the beginning of freedom. Not the end of the work, just the beginning. And the beginning is everything, because here's what happens when you start to see the map for what it actually is. Your relationships begin to change. Not because the people around you changed, but because you stopped bringing the same invisible expectations into every room. You stopped needing people to repair something they didn't break. You stopped auditioning for love in relationships where you were already chosen. You start to recognize the difference between a connection that is genuinely good for you and one that simply feels familiar, because it recreates the emotional texture of something old and unresolved. And that recognition, quiet, internal, completely invisible to everyone around you, is one of the most powerful things a human being can develop. It doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It doesn't make you closed. It makes you conscious. Jung believed that the relationship we had with our mother was our first education in what it means to be human. And like all early educations, some of it served us. Some of it limited us. Some of it was exactly what we needed. And some of it was never true to begin with, but we believed it anyway because we were too young to know the difference. The work is not to erase that education. It is to graduate from it, to take what was genuinely good, the love that was real, the care that was true, the moments of safety and warmth that actually happened, and to carry those things forward. While gently, firmly, and without cruelty to anyone, including yourself, setting down the rest. And now I want to speak directly to the part of you that came here today, carrying something heavy. Maybe you have spent years trying to understand why certain relationships always seem to end the same way, why you keep choosing the same kind of person, why you keep feeling the same kind of lonely even when you are surrounded by people who care about you. Maybe you have done everything right on the outside and still felt like something fundamental is missing on the inside. Maybe you have never been able to fully name it, but you have felt it. In your chest. In the way certain words land harder than they should. In the way certain silences fill you with a fear that seems completely out of proportion to what is actually happening. That is not weakness. That is not evidence that you are too sensitive or too damaged or too far gone. That is a nervous system that learned something very early and has been loyal to that lesson ever since. And loyalty, even when it is hurting you, deserves to be met with compassion. Not judgment. Not another layer of shame on top of everything you are already carrying. Compassion for the child who needed more than they received, for the adult who has been trying to fill that space ever since. For the part of you that is still reaching, in every relationship, in every moment of longing. For the thing that was supposed to come first. You deserved it then, you deserve it now. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, always begins with the mother. Not because she is the source of everything that went wrong, but because she was the first mirror, the first face that reflected back to you what you were worth, what the world thought of your existence. And when that mirror was cracked, even slightly, even unintentionally, the reflection it gave you was never quite accurate. You have been living inside that slightly distorted image for your entire life. The work, the real work, is learning to see yourself without it, to meet yourself outside of what was reflected back to you before you were old enough to question the reflection, to discover, perhaps for the very first time, who you actually are when you are not performing for anyone's approval, when you are not managing anyone's emotions, when you are not earning your right to take up space. Just you, exactly as you are, without apology, without explanation, without the exhausting labor of making yourself acceptable to a standard that was never really about you to begin with. That is what Jung spent his life pointing people toward. Not a perfect childhood retroactively, not a mother who finally understands, not a relationship that repairs everything the first one broke. Just you, whole, present, free from the map that was drawn for you before you had any say in the matter. That freedom is real. It is available to you, and it begins, as all the most important things do, with simply being willing to see what is actually there. If something in this felt uncomfortably close to your own life, that discomfort is not something to push away. It is the most honest thing you have felt in a long time, and honest is always where healing begins.